This is 36 eggs. This is 3 days supply for me. When I tell people I'm consuming 12 eggs per day, they get really concerned about the amount of cholesterol I'm consuming. But it's perfectly normal to eat Captain Crunch cereal, go to a coffee shop, order croissants that are loaded with sugar, or start your day off with 27 ingredient bread loaded with jam with zero nutrition. If you want to be healthy, eat eggs.
No. Someone eating junk food does not impede them to tell others that dietary cholesterol might be bad for you. In theory, at least, because those two things are not mutually exclusive. Just like someone doesn't necessarily have to exercise to say that, hey, I think exercise is healthy. Or are you also trying to say that a smoker cannot tell others that smoking is indeed bad for your health? This logic doesn't add up. But anyways, eggs and dietary cholesterol. What does the science truly say about this? This is indeed quite a complex topic that requires a lot of nuances. So without further ado, let's jump into the science. And for that, I would like to highlight a paper released by Mohamed Hossein Rouhani in 2017. This systematic review and meta-analysis of randomized clinical trials looked at the effects of egg consumption on blood lipids. This forest plot explains why there's so much confusion among so many people on this topic. We need to distinguish between hyper-responders and hypo-responders. Hyper-responders refers to people that absorb cholesterol on a greater basis than quote-unquote normal or hypo-responders. And if we don't differentiate between hyper and hypo-responders, we get a little bit of a mess, as we can see at the top of the forest plot. The results are over the place, although on average, LDL cholesterol increases by 4.10 milligrams of deciliter, which is a small increase. However, look at the hyperresponders. On average, LDL cholesterol almost increases by 22 milligrams per deciliter, while in the hyporesponders, we don't see any increase in LDL cholesterol at all. This nuance already is crucial when talking about eggs. If you are a hyporesponder of cholesterol, probably eating 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 eggs a day won't really do much on your blood lipids. However, if you are a hyperresponder, that's a totally different story. And telling people to consume even 1 egg a day might potentially increase the risk for cardiovascular disease down the line. Cholesterol absorption is regulated in the body by mainly 2 receptors, to make it very simple. We are talking about MPC1L1 receptors and ABCG5G8 receptors. The MPC1L1 receptors are responsible for cholesterol uptake, so cholesterol absorption inside the body, and ABCG5G8 receptors are responsible for cholesterol excretion. By the way, these 2 receptors can also be found in the liver. MPC1L1 receptors help the liver cells recapture cholesterol that would otherwise be lost in bile. Your body can excrete cholesterol by packing cholesterol in biles. And it's exactly that MPC1L1 receptors that can actually reuptake cholesterol from these biles and put it back inside the body. So if you have genetic mutations in these 2 receptors, you can either be a hypo or a hyper responder. Furthermore, we have really good data, rigorous data, that tells us that there's a ceiling on dietary cholesterol. And this is illustrated greatly by the following meta-regression. This study was released by Vincent Melissa J. and colleagues in 2019. We can see that going from 0 to around 600 milligrams of dietary cholesterol per day, LDL cholesterol increases by 10 milligrams per deciliter on average. But as the dots illustrates, that's probably different for hyper and hyporesponders. And LDL cholesterol doesn't seem to change much after the 600 milligrams per deciliter mark. And this is yet another essential piece when we are talking about eggs and their effects on cardiovascular disease. Because when we compare 2 different groups of people, one group consumes around 200 milligrams of dietary cholesterol per day, while the other consumes around 350 milligrams of dietary cholesterol per day. Would we really see a significant increase in risk within these 2 groups? No. Comparing groups above certain dietary cholesterol intakes per day decreases the chances of detecting any significant results. This is not the only limitation in eggs and, well, cardiovascular disease research. What a lot of papers actually do when we look at cardiovascular disease and eggs consumption is that they are adjusting for cholesterol, either for cholesterol intake, so dietary cholesterol, or their blood lipids, so the cholesterol in your blood. Why is that an issue? Well, if you adjust for something, you're eliminating something as a confounding variable. To illustrate the issue behind this, let's use BMI. When we adjust for BMI, what we're basically doing is we are taking all the people with, for example, a BMI of 30 and compare them against other people with the same BMI. So you're putting all the people with the BMI of 30 in one group and compare those against each other. So adjusting for dietary cholesterol or LDL cholesterol, which can, for example, be also affected by dietary cholesterol, as we've seen previously, nullifies the effects eggs can have on cardiovascular disease. And all the studies I've seen so far, and I've read quite a few, that don't really show an increase in risk for cardiovascular disease had the same issues that I just talked about. So either comparing two groups in which their dietary cholesterol intake is too high or adjusting for cholesterol. Both things don't make a lot of sense. What happens if we look at research that took these two things into consideration? This study, published by Song and colleagues in 2019, included almost 30,000 participants. Their mean age is almost 52 years old, and they were followed for 17.5 years. There were sadly 5,400 incidents of cardiovascular events and 6,132 all-cause deaths that occurred within this time frame. The results indicate that each additional 300 milligrams of dietary cholesterol consumed per day was significantly associated with a 17% high risk for incidents for cardiovascular disease and an 18% high risk for all-cause mortality. Each additional half egg consumed per day was significantly associated with a 6% high risk for incident cardiovascular disease and an 8% for all-cause mortality. The researchers, however, did something really cool. They adjusted for dietary cholesterol. Do you want to guess what happens to the results if you adjust for dietary cholesterol? Both results, incident cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality, were no longer significant after adjusting for dietary cholesterol consumption. We also have substitution studies in which eggs were replaced with nuts and whole grains. And when we look at those studies, we see a decrease in risk. All the studies I've read so far that took these two or these 3 points into consideration showed an increased risk for egg consumption and cardiovascular disease, for example. We should be careful when we talk about eggs. What are your thoughts about this topic? Feel free to let me know in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you during my next video.